Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Bulletproof Dental Practice Podcast. Today, I'm flying solo without my co-host, Pete, because I got a very personal friend on the podcast today, someone that oftentimes will not do something like this because it's not really, according to her, in her wheelhouse, but she has so much to give and so much that we can all learn from. And she's been an inspirational, positive force of my life. I'm very lucky to call her my personal friend. I met her through a series of very interesting events, but I have the pleasure of caring for her in my dental practice. And in turn and in kind, she has dove deep into my personal life and helped me immeasurably in so many different situations. And she's imparted so much wisdom to me. And I feel blessed in the fact that she's paid it so deeply forward with me that I wanted to, in turn, give you a taste of her greatness and her advice. So it is my distinct pleasure to welcome somebody very special, Sage Robbins, to this podcast. So Sage, you may know because she has a very famous husband, Tony Robbins. But although Tony is a 6'7" force of power, I always think that the biggest and most powerful aspect of that relationship is this demure but extremely powerful wife he's got, Sage Robbins. So without any further ado, let's get started. I hope you enjoy this. And if you do, please like or share this podcast. This is gold for the right person who needs this at this moment. Thank you so much. And I hope you enjoy all of it. Take care, guys. First of all, it is so amazing to have you here. When I see you, it's such a sense of peace comes over to me because obviously you've been in my life for some time, and every time we see each other professionally, invariably you wind up going and checking on how I am, and there's no BS factor with you. You can read me. So if I say I'm doing okay, you're like, are you really okay? I'm like, well, no, actually, no, I'm going through a hard time. And just appreciate your friendship and your wisdom. You've been a very impactful person for me personally. And I appreciate you coming on this podcast because the things that we shared have not only helped me, but I've paid it forward and tried to help other people with that wisdom. So just really appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you too. And thank you for the invitation, and the feeling's mutual. I've loved this session. Sometimes I'm coming in to get my tooth cleaned or some type of dental work. But somehow life always takes us deeper than that. And it's just as meaningful for me as it is for you, my dear.
Thank you so much. So I want to jump right in and share just something personal. And for those of you who have listened to the podcast for some time, you know that a couple of years ago, I was alluding to going through a hard time. And I hesitate to use that language now because of what I've learned from Sage as well, because I was going through something, I was suffering. It was something really in hindsight and through our talks that I realized it was inappropriate suffering. I had an employee issue and it kind of went bad. And the employee was saying things about me and I made it really big and it was affecting me. It was affecting me on a personal level. And you said something so interesting to me. You said, first of all, you told me I'm overindulging in the suffering, that, God has a way, or the universe has a way of, if you don't learn something, you'll get the volume turned up on you and you'll have to learn that lesson over and over and over. You can say, aha, this is for my learning, for my higher growth. And the interesting thing is that through this process and talking with you, I realized I had overindulged in my suffering. I made the suffering bigger than it needed to be, because really it was an encapsulated incident. I'm fine. No one was hurt. It's over. But I went really deep and created an identity out of the suffering. And you said something so beautiful to me. You said, who do I need to apologize to? Who have you said to me, there's conscious and unconscious leadership. So unconsciously, who have you brought into your struggle along with you? And immediately, viscerally, I was like, my family. Well, go home and apologize to them. Who in your family? My wife and my children. And I went home that night and I sat down. I said, Daddy's been going through some stuff. And I inappropriately indulged. I went so far in the suffering. I made the suffering about me. And I'm sorry about what I did for Daddy not showing up and being distracted with that. And at that moment, Sage, my children and my wife all started crying. And it was a beautiful cathartic moment. And it was such a valuable lesson for me, and one that I've actually learned since. So thank you for that. But I was able to from that conversation, realize that it's when we are taking suffering on for ourselves, we're not showing up for the people that we love, and we're showing them a clear example of a way to live, and it's just not the example I want to show for my family.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember that moment, and you mentioned just one thing I'd love to just touch upon, is you said inappropriate suffering. The truth is we all suffer. We all suffer, whether it's inappropriate or too much or too little. When I mentioned about the volume being turned up, we have an external circumstance. Usually have a trigger of pain. For you, it was that, that circumstance with your employee. And, we put meaning upon meaning. This shouldn't have happened. This is unfair. This is unjust. And that narrative becomes almost like a crazy eight in our mind. And it just happens over and over and over again. And one meaning stacks upon another meaning. And then, we'll have an interaction with somebody we love and we're not fully present or connected. And so, boom, another, another experience and another meaning stacks. And I think, what's beautiful is you would call inappropriate. I don't know if it's inappropriate because it was.
Yeah, good point.
It was, and it caused, your own internal suffering, the pain within inside yourself that was caused by your believing and thinking was turned up, what you call inappropriate, but it also created an opening. I think that's we're living in such a unique time right now, and externally in the world, the volume is turned up. If you turn on the news, if you go on social media, there's a lot of, divisiveness, and inside of our own minds as human beings, it's like, this is scary, this is overwhelming, I'm terrified for my life, for my family's life, my mommy if she gets COVID, or the injustice, or whatever the labels that we put on things. They may just be a label, but with that carries meaning and carries emotion, and we carry that around unconsciously inside of ourselves. And for myself, at a time in my life when the volume turned up so high is when actually turned within. I was looking for something outside myself, something that had to change, and it wasn't changing. And that caused me to look at myself. And through that process, there's amazing tools, for my own, because that's all I can share is my own experience, is I use meditation and prayer. We do a priming type exercise that we do that, I'll share. We'll send the link that you can send it out to your people. And it's like, thoughts just come, and it's like our mind, there's a tuning to our mind or to our consciousness through the actions of prayer meditation. It tunes us, it opens us, it centers us, it grounds us, and gives us a broader perspective than just simply the thoughts that keep regurgitating inside of our mind.
And it's so
And
hard to quiet that mind. Like you talk about that crazy eight, and just, I think I just want to explain that to our listeners. It's like, it's just, you keep going through this certain pattern of like feeling guilty and then suffering and then anger and suffering. And the mind just doesn't stop. I was reading this really cool book. Are you familiar with Naval Ravikant by any chance? I was
no.
talking to Josh about it. So Josh, I sent this book to Josh, and Naval Ravikant just wrote this book called The Almanac, and
Mhm.
he's just brilliant. You will love this man. He's amazing. And he talks about that you can't actually chase happiness.
Mhm.
Happiness is positive thoughts and just positivity. It's just total bullshit. Like you can't be positive all the time. And it implies a duality. If there's positive, there's negative. So he says people just need peace. And if you
Mhm.
have peace and if your mind is still, happiness can enter into that space. And
Mhm.
I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but while you were talking, it just made me think of something. Maybe it's not inappropriate suffering. It was an overindulgence in suffering. You called me out and you got up in my face. I'll never forget the day. Remember, you're like, Spodak, are you listening to me? And
Yeah.
like, for those of you who don't know, I'm 6'5", and she's up in my face. And I'm like, I am freaking scared. I was scared of you at that moment because you really wanted to get into my face and just you're not listening. You've got to get it. You've got to get it. And I so appreciate that you did that with me, because at that point, the overindulgence in suffering, my identity was suffering.
Yes, I
And
know.
to your point, then if you're suffering and that's your identity, guess what you're going to get? More suffering.
Well, more suffering or crumbs of sympathy, sympathy for ourselves, sympathy from others. We'll go and we'll perpetuate that, and we'll share our story. And it's like, oh gosh, Craig, I'm so sorry to hear that. And then somebody else, and it's like, oh man, I'm so sorry. But that's not really that
That
fulfilling.
sucks, by the way. It sucks. That's why
Sym-
when I was, yeah, sorry.
No, it's not a liberating feeling. I think we all yearn to be able to connect in a meaningful way with the people that we love, and remove the thoughts or the beliefs that are interfering with that reality.
Yeah, it's and that's why I even hesitated when I was looking back on it. It was maybe 2 years ago now. I was saying, just a moment ago, I went through a really rough time. Like it really wasn't a rough time.
Mhm.
No one got sick, thank God. I'm
Yeah.
fine. I'm better for it. I'm so much better for it. I learned so many lessons from that time. And I want to talk about a quick story that I don't think I've ever told the listeners before. And I'll keep the man's privacy because he's a listener, an avid listener of the podcast. But my partner and I had a summit, 200 people, right before the COVID crisis hit last week of February. And I'm in Dallas. And at the end of the summit, there's a bunch of people waiting around to talk to us.